Well, thank you. It's certainly an honor for me to be here, and I very much enjoyed receiving the invitation to come here. I would like to talk about technology or changes in libraries, how technology is driving them, to look at some of the current trends in libraries, and then maybe discuss where they might lead us. But first, I would like to look at the big picture, perhaps to back away from libraries and look at them from a distance. Here are some statistics. Everybody loves statistics. This is from a report of the OECD last month, Education at a Glance. And it is showing that there is a big difference between the salary of people without university degrees and those with university degrees. And in this survey, it compared all of these countries, New Zealand on the right side, too small to see, okay. Anyway, New Zealand on the right side includes Canada, US, etc. But the big surprise is Brazil over there on the left side, the bar in red. So that in Brazil, they're saying that a person could earn 2.5 times more money with a university education than those without a university education. This is from that same OECD report. And again, it's comparing these countries and showing the percentage of population that attain tertiary education or university education by age group. And the square, the blue square, is the older generation, 55 to 64 years old. And the triangles is the new generation, 25 to 34 years old. And in all cases, there are many more people now going to university than in the previous generation. On the left side, it's showing that in Korea, there are over 60% of young people are now in university. Over there on the right side is Brazil. It is lagging behind all of the countries that was surveyed. But of course, this is the result of Brazil's history. But now, because there are something like 30 million people that have been raised out of poverty, we can only expect that the demand for university education will just grow by leaps and bounds in Brazil. This is a different report from the OECD. It's measuring innovation. It's showing a chart with the circle, the bigger the circle, the more publications. And then the lines between the circle, the thicker the line means more collaboration between the two circles. So I have two charts. This one is 1998, and I'm going to show you 2008. I have marked some of them in red, so you can see that Brazil is on the lower right side. You see that small dot for Brazil there. Now I'm going to click here, and this is 2008. So once again, 1998, 2008. And you can see the big winner here is China. China really comes out. But Brazil also has increased almost by 100% the number of research publications. So those were my statistics, and now I can make some divinations for you. The first divination I will give you is that in 30 years' time, universities will be more popular than ever. More people want to go to universities. There's a big difference between the money without university and the money you get with a university education. Secondly, that universities will still need information, and those that purchase it and mediate it. And lastly, this is my third divination, I say that machine translation will become more and more important because the number of publications the majority of published research will move away from English. English will not be as important. So, going on here, what will libraries be? Some people say the academic library, it's dead, there's no future. Well, I rather believe that we are in a state of change, a state of very big change. But the library is not, the library will continue. It's like the kings in olden times, they would say, the king is dead, long live the king. Because something has died, certainly something is different from yesterday. But the library is going to continue and it will have something new, something new. But there's no denying that technology, disruptive technology, is a big risk and it causes us a lot of stress and frustration. This report by OCLC said that this was the number one thing, the number one challenge or risk to libraries now, disruptive technologies. Once again, let me back away from libraries and show you what's happening in two sister professions. Journalism is one. You can see that there's lots of newspapers that are disappearing. They go bankrupt. People are not buying print newspapers. So people think that maybe journalism is no longer a viable profession. But you can see some changes, like the rise of social media or crowdsourcing for journalism. There's still a question, will this really supplant journalism? Another sister profession is that of university presses. Again, there are many, many university presses that are closing. They just could not remain viable. They were not economically effective anymore. One change that has happened is that some of these university presses have merged with libraries because they found it a viable way towards the future. Okay, well, let's go on to libraries now. Let's look at the traditional library collection. And for the last 20 years, people have been telling us we must work smarter and we must do more with less. This is a chart that I have modified from the statistics given by the Association of Research Libraries over a 20-year period. And you can see that there is an increase in interlibrary loan borrowing, an increase in the total number of students in academic libraries, but there is a decrease in total library staff, a decrease in total circulation, and a decrease in the number of reference transactions. This is pretty much true in all academic libraries, my library included, at the University of Hong Kong. So if I continue on with statistics from my library, the University of Hong Kong, or HKU, or Hong Kong U, that's the abbreviation, I can show you that over the last 10 years, the percentage of our budget spent on economic resources has rapidly increased, so that now we are spending 73.3% of our book budget on electronic resources. That means that there has been a corresponding decrease in the amount spent on monographs and print journals. And just as a by the way, or an aside here, it's similar to what we would say a ride on the tail of a dragon in China. If you grab hold of the tail of a dragon, it will be a wild ride and you do not know where it will end. So if you look at this red line in the graph, this red line in the chart, it is the tail of the dragon to us. This is another statistic here. It's showing that the number of our e-journals is now 43,000 compared to the number of print journals, 2,500. And this one. This is showing that now in 2010, the number of printed books, we have 2.8 million. But in 2010, for the first time, we had more e-books than printed books. We now have 2.9 million e-books. And if you follow this red line here, this tail of the dragon, and if you extrapolate it to the next 10 years, that it's quite surprising where that will end up. Another trend is that many things are moving to the cloud. Everyone hears about the cloud. And this is true not just for content like e-journals, but it's also true for services and functions. Now the user interface is moving to the cloud from companies like Ex Libris offering Primo, let's see, WorldCat Local by WorldCat or OCLC. So it's not just content, it's everything. It's moving to the cloud. This is a survey done by Cornell in Ithaca, and they found that the good news here is that they found that the library has a very important role as a buyer of electronic resources. That's kind of surprising. They didn't say selection, they said buyer. Our role is to buy these electronic resources. The not so good news is that this report here found that there was an increase of library disintermediation. That libraries are no longer involved in the information selection or information discovery process. Other trends that we can see is that ebooks are following e-journals. I mean to say that for e-journals, there's always been a subscription model. In the beginning for ebooks, there wasn't subscription, but now they are following e-journals and there is a subscription for most ebooks. For e-journals, there was the big deal, which meant that libraries were no longer selecting journals, they just paid money and got the big deal, the big package for e-journals. For ebooks, similarly, librarians are not quite so involved. There's something called the patron-driven acquisitions, where the patron would click on a title and that means the library buys it. So that's a librarian disintermediation. There are things like approval plans. You set up the approval plan and then it runs automatically without much librarian involvement. There are open access materials, which is a good thing, that's true, but it means that librarians are not really selecting open access materials. They have access to all open access materials. So again, librarian disintermediation. It means that faculty librarians are no longer selecting. And it means that although funding and usage have shifted to e-materials, the majority of our library buildings, our librarian time, is still dedicated to the traditional analog materials. Another concern is library space. Let's see. Especially in Hong Kong, where space is at a premium. We have very little space in Hong Kong. So now we find that library space is too valuable for shelving, it's too valuable for wood pulp on shelving. We need to return this space back to study spaces to make a creative study environment for students. This quote by David Lewis of Purdue University. He says, "It's imperative to redevelop the library as the primary learning space on campus." And these pictures here, these are from the University of Otago in New Zealand. They have a very beautiful learning commons. And now we at the University of Hong Kong, we also are building a learning commons. We have had to ship 26% of our collection out of the building into a warehouse 3 kilometers away. So to make room for this learning commons. For the 700,000 books that are now in the warehouse, people can request and they get it the next day. This is a project, the name of this project is the Hong Kong Academic Library Link, or Hong Kong All. It is similar to the Alexandria system in the prefectural libraries of Sao Paulo, because here, Hong Kong All, we can search across 8 university libraries, the entire collection of them, which is something like 11 million volumes. However, unlike the Alexandria system of the prefectural system of Sao Paulo, this system here, Hong Kong All, it does everything online. It allows the student to place his request online, and then without professional librarian mediation, the request goes through to the remote library, and the paraprofessional there in the remote library pick the book from the shelf, they put it into a bag, and it goes overnight, and the user receives it the next day. Again, it is librarian disintermediation, and it's very, very popular. Students and the faculty love it. There is an increase of usage of this system every year, year on year. This is a project that we're doing in Hong Kong for 8 university libraries. My university, the University of Hong Kong, is one of 8 university libraries in Hong Kong. All of us are cooperating, and we will have this remote off-site storage. It's called the Joint University Research Archive, or JURA. It will be open in 2013. It will have a collection of 7.9 million non-duplicate items. It will have robotic retrieval. And the picture on the right is about the storage with a track in the middle for a robot to go up and down and pick books. The key here is that it will not have duplicates. And we have done some studies, and we have found that around 35% of items in every library of our 8 university libraries is a duplicate of another item in another library, right? So we have to dedupe those and only have unique items in the store. Well, so this brings up the idea of linked repositories. There are repositories for e-journals now, like Portico, Locks, Clocks. These are online systems. But think of what a linked repository for printed materials would be, right? If we in Hong Kong have a repository for printed materials, and it's 8 million volumes, right? Then how many more repositories does there need to be in the world? Does each library need a repository like this? Does each country need a repository? Or each continent? I don't think so. I think something like 8 or 10 repositories of printed materials, not duplicates, but a full repository, could service the entire world. And then if you had retrieval, online retrieval, or maybe even a book service from them, that should be enough. So then, if you have these linked repositories, what should you do with the duplicates? We can sell them to China. In the year, and let's see, last year, Cornell University sold duplicates to the University of Tsinghua in China, and they earned $800,000 US. That's a lot of money. That money will go far. And if that doesn't work, you can put them on eBay. So the last idea here that I want to bring up about our traditional collections is that of special collections. Once again, the idea is that all of us, academic libraries around the world, have been in a race to build a big pile of books, and we're all buying the same thing, so that for the most part, your library has what my library has. Well, in an online world, we don't really need that. And also, in an online world, it's not really good enough to say that my library has 3 million books, because my 3 million books are probably the same as your 3 million books. So the only thing that is separating my library from your library is that we have a special collections, and that we focus on certain materials. We collect Hong Kong materials at the University of Hong Kong. And we have the biggest special collections on Hong Kong materials anywhere in the world. That makes us unique. And your library probably has similar special collections. And well, for the most part, in years past, you would say, well, that's special collections. Only the 1 or 2 scholars will ever go into special collections. Who uses special collections? But now that's no longer true. There are many people that use special collections. Here is 2 examples, one from the Library of Congress it is showing that the traffic to the website of the Library of Congress, that 41% goes to the American Memory Project, which is a special collections put online, compared to only 17% of the traffic which goes to the catalog. Or the other example is Bibliothèque Nationale of France. And in that case, there are two special collections, Expositions and Gallica, which account for over 50% of the traffic, compared to 26% of traffic to the catalog. So if you have a compelling special collections, and if you put it online and you have a reasonable user interface, people will come and it will be used. So, okay, now we can look at the future. There is this quote from Daniel Greenstein, the Vice Provost for Academic Planning and Programs at the University of California. He said this in 2009. He said, the University Library of the future will be sparsely staffed, highly decentralized, and have a physical plant consisting of little more than special collections and study areas. When he said that 2 years ago, it was very provocative and it made many people angry, many librarians angry. But now more and more people are embracing the future. So let's examine this. Okay, sparsely staffed, what would that mean? It means that, well, university librarians, a few of them, have made licenses with vendors to provide content, services, and functions from the cloud. Highly decentralized would mean that being library-centric is no longer good. We must go out of the library. We must become embedded in teaching programs and research teams. A small physical plant, the building, right? So the building is mostly given over to study spaces and to special collections. Okay, well that was Dan Greenstein. And as I said, that was very provocative, and perhaps it was overly strict. Well, here's another quote from David Lewis, whom I like well, of Purdue University in 2007. All right, we must reposition the library and information tools, resources, and expertise so it is embedded into the teaching, learning, and research enterprises. This includes both the human and increasingly computer-mediated systems. Emphasis should be placed on external, not library-centered structures and systems. Okay, all right, so we know the library is changing. We're not exactly sure how it's changing, but it appears that we have a very short time to deal with these changes and to prepare for the future. Well, what should we do? Luckily, there are new opportunities. This one, e-science, e-research, e-science librarianship. It is a new opportunity, and it is one in which librarians can work and can increase their roles in libraries. It will allow librarians to embed themselves in teaching and research. It will allow us to cooperate across the disciplines and across institutions. It will allow us to create and develop computer-mediated structures. Oop, where did I go? Oh, okay. So I'll get these all up here. Okay, so these three definitions here then. So e-science, keywords, global collaboration, next generation of computational infrastructure. Okay. E-research, keywords, collaboration and the sharing of knowledge between researchers. E-science librarianship, some keywords. It will be a vital part of the developing research infrastructure. It will have digital repositories containing both publications and data. Well, okay, here is Karen Williams at the University of Minnesota, and she sees these library roles in e-science. And if you look through these, most of these are things that we have already been doing. It's now that we are repurposing, repackaging ourselves to work in this new paradigm of e-science. I cannot tell you about all of them, but let me tell you about the first one, campus engagement, advocacy. Everything starts with advocacy. And for this, I want to tell you a short story. In 2007, I applied for and received a grant from the Soros Foundation to put on a conference in Hong Kong for open access on research output and data sets. And to do this, I had to organize a program. And for this, I wanted to have a local speaker, a local very important person, a VIP. And for this, I looked at this man. His name is Professor Roland Chin. He is the Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research at the University of Hong Kong, but he is also the chair of the Research Grants Council, or RGC, in Hong Kong, which is the biggest funder of research in Hong Kong. And I asked him to speak at this conference. He said that he was too busy. And I said, well, I'll write your speech. And he said, okay. Well, that was good, you know, happy day. I got my man, and more importantly, I got to write his speech. So then I looked around for what the story that I can write in his speech. And I found that when he graduated university, his first 2 years, he worked at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. And when I saw that, I remembered the story of the Apollo 11 lunar landing. For that lunar landing, they made tapes. They broadcast tapes from the moon to Earth for broadcast on TV. However, the broadcast from the moon was in high resolution and in a format that TVs at that time could not receive. So they had to convert it into a very low resolution to show on the TVs. And that's what all of us saw in 1969. We saw that low resolution on the TVs. So an example here is, this is supposed to be a high resolution. I'm sorry, I don't really have a good picture of the high resolution. But this is the high resolution, and this is the low resolution. So the low resolution we saw on the TV. And of course, well, the Apollo 11 project was a huge success. And they put the tapes in a box, and after a while, the tapes disappeared. No one could find the tapes. They can't find the tapes today. No one knows where they are. Perhaps they're in this US government warehouse in a box that has no label, no number, and no barcode. Or perhaps not. Perhaps lost is lost. Well, if we had the tapes today, with our new technology, we could go back and use those tapes and extract much more information from them. But we don't have those tapes. Lost is lost. And no one knows when we're going back to the moon again. So this is the story that I put in his speech, and this is the story that he gave in his speech. And it was very effective. The conference was, my conference in 2007 was a success, and it also planted an idea in the chair of the RGC. And it appears that this year they have the RGC, the RGC has called for a proposal, and we will make them proposal on a data archive in Hong Kong for all of the 8 universities. It will include a change in grant application and in reporting, so that the applicant, he must tell how he's going to archive his data or give some reason why he cannot archive his data. And of course, after we have this proposal, and after it is approved, well, then the work begins, and it will be libraries that must create and develop a repository for curating and preserving the data. It will be librarians who figure out how the type of metadata to describe the data set, and how the metadata on one discipline can translate into another discipline. So it's all the beginning, and it started with advocacy. Another idea here that I want to bring in is about knowledge transfer. Some people say knowledge translation, some people call it knowledge exchange. It came to us in 2007. Let me find my paper here. The idea behind this is that in developed countries, in developed countries like the US or Western Europe, people are very happy now if they get a 2% growth year on year. Well, 2% is very low. So people are looking around in those developed countries and trying to find new sources for growth. And they look at universities, the academic sector, and they say that this is this is a large untapped engine for new growth in these developed countries. Some people say it's the third mission of universities, like Professor Cunha's described this morning. Anyway, in Hong Kong, the University Grants Council gave this initiative to all of the 8 universities. And in the case of several, like at the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, they have knowledge translation, and they have used this to create a policy on open access. They mandate the deposit of research output in open access because of their policy of knowledge translation. Okay, well, in Hong Kong, the 8 universities received this, and my university, the University of Hong Kong, also received it. And at the University of Hong Kong, we considered it so important that we rewrote our mission and vision statement, and now we have 3 missions. The first is teaching and learning, second, research, and the third is knowledge exchange. And they set up an Office of Knowledge Exchange, and they gave us 50 million Hong Kong a year. Let's see. I got ahead of myself. Well, here I just wanted to show you that the language that we use in Hong Kong is similar to the language that's used by SIBiUSP. It's to make the research and researchers at Hong Kong U highly visible and discoverable, with the goal of increasing all forms of collaboration. Well, at my university, they set up an Office of Knowledge Exchange. The library made several proposals, and they were all granted. We received lots of money from the Office of Knowledge Exchange to do several projects. One, of course, was to augment the institutional repository at the University of Hong Kong, which is called the Hub. And we augmented it by adding details on researchers, their grant details, their publication details, patents, community service, etc. So this is an example of a researcher page, which is an author profile. And we made these for all of the 1,500 professoriate staff at the University of Hong Kong. And to do this, we had to make collaboration with many different offices on campus. The graduate school, the Office of Knowledge Transfer, the registry, all of those people, they were doing their own separate projects. We made collaboration with them, and we extracted their data, and for the first time we made this data public. And now people can search on it, and they can search on it for these different people. The data that we have at Hong Kong U for publications is dirty because it was never public before and people never cared about it. So we download the data using an API from Elsevier. We download the data from Scopus, bring it into the hub, and overlay on top of our dirty data so that we can make our people look good. This is the achievement section for this professor. It's showing Professor Paris. He is one of our star researchers. In 2003, he isolated the coronavirus responsible for SARS, or avian bird flu. And because of that, he is very popular as a supervisor for graduate students. This page is showing in public his graduate students and the titles of their thesis after they graduate. So those ones in blue there, you can click on them and go to the full text thesis or dissertation of that student. And this part here is showing the bibliometrics that we harvest from different places around the web and bring back here to show for our people. It shows numbers, citation count, paper count, and they are hyperlinked so that you could click back into the source to see the full citation. It's a way, okay, the bibliometrics are one thing, but it's also a way of exploring the research of this man by being able to click back into the sources. And a result that we're very proud of is that when you do a Google search, any relevant Google search, it will bring back a hit list. And usually at the top of that hit list is the entry for the hub. That's what you can see here. This one that's circled is the entry for the hub. We believe that this is one way that shows that we are succeeding, and it has been very useful to show this to the Hong Kong U Office of Knowledge Exchange. They agree with us. So one other way for institutional repositories. There are many other things that an institutional repository can do. It need not be only open access or only publication details. It can be an expert finder. If you're searching for an expert to do a speech to your group or to speak to the newspaper or television, it can be a source for bibliometrics. It can be a source for research assessment exercises, a source for ranking, for people who make rankings. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to the University of Sao Paulo. I saw in the newspaper 2 days ago that they were now in the Times Higher Education ranking, I think for the first time, and the only one in South America. It can be a source for peer review, and in this regard, please consider what peer review is. People think that peer review is the gold standard for doing evaluations. However, if someone asks you to do peer review of somebody or some university that you have never heard of, what do? You will probably go into Scopus or Web of Science and look for those evil numbers and find out, how they compare to other universities. Of course, you would not stop there in doing peer review. You should probably actually read the articles, but you would start with the numbers. And in that regard, the institutional repository can be a place where you start to gather this information. There is this report that was commissioned by OCLC. The author was Tom McCall, and he did a survey of about 5 countries that were using the institutional repository as a source for research assessment exercises. And in this first quote up there, his key point is that those libraries, especially in Australia, that were using the institutional repository they could leverage the value of the institutional repository for this purpose. And then he said below here, there is a general sense that the traditional library business of putting books on shelves is being consigned to the past, and that librarians see their libraries as having an institutional information infrastructure role within the universities. He went on to make, in another report, he went on to make several recommendations for libraries. He said libraries should manage research outputs data at national and international scales. Libraries should take responsibility for the efficient operation of research output repositories across research environments. Libraries should provide expertise in bibliometrics. And libraries should claim their territory. They should be more assertive. They must have a voice in planning institutional responses. They must avoid reactive or largely clerical roles. And they must have energetic library leadership. In this report, this is a different OCLC report, A Slice of Research Life. They did a survey of many academics in universities, and of all of the academics they interviewed, it was surprising not one had set a foot in the library. Not one of them had gone into the library. And they, their conclusion in this report was that is that researchers, the faculties, they don't understand libraries. They don't know what libraries are doing. They don't know what libraries can offer. And the same with administrators of the university. And then their final one was that libraries must articulate and create their own future. We have to go out there and do advocacy and show people, tell people, teach people what we can do, or else they won't know. If you expect them to come into the library, that ship has sailed. That was yesterday. They're not coming into the library. You have to go out and meet them on their own turf, in their own department. And that's the end. Muito obrigado.